Hello guys, so today we're going to talk about elements and principles of form. Alright, so we're going to continue on with our graphic design type of theories. And today is pretty much the elements of what we call principles of form. So, as I said in one of my previous lectures, is like form follows function. So basically, a design has to work in order for it to actually look pretty. All right. The function of the design should always contradict how pretty it looks. It may look great, but if it functions properly, it will not last. So you have to basically interpret exactly what the project is supposed to do or how an element is supposed to be laid out in order for it to function properly. So we're going to talk about some elements that are going to help with that. And one is going to be compositional elements, which is compositional elements are the building blocks of design principles. So some of these elements we're going to talk about today are going to be basically some elements that every designer should know in order to do a design. And one of these basic elements is line. All right, basic element used to describe a shape and can actual or implied, vertical or horizontal, diagonal or contoured. So a line, when I mention the word line, you instantly think of a straight line drawn on a piece of paper. All right. Well, it's not just that. All right, line can be made into what looks like a 3D object. As you can see here, we've got a hand, or what looks like a hand, but it's really just a series of lines that are kind of like drawn and curved at a certain point to give it depth. But we're also talking about what we call implied lines, where it's like you have a line or eyes of a person is the most important element in a design. If you have somebody who has eyes, it is so powerful to have somebody looking at something. And then you kind of like for instance, there was a experiment held in a downtown area where they just had a guy who was standing on a sidewalk and he was just looking up at something going on up in a building. All right, which really nothing was going on. Just wanted to see how many people would actually look up. And so pretty much everybody who walked by this person was at some point looking up to see what the guy was looking at. All right. That is so powerful. If you were doing the same thing, if you're walking by and then you saw somebody looking up, you'd wonder what they were looking up at too. That is what is called an implied line, which is basically a direction of sight. I think in the last one we showed for the American Red Cross, we showed like a piggy bank, where the pig was looking at the American Red Cross symbol, which basically that is called an implied line as well. All right, so we're dealing with lines. Lines also make up shapes. All right, shapes have two-dimensional space created by joining the ends of two lines or a line. And that creates a shape. Remember when we were doing the pen tool in Illustrator, we were dealing with, you had to draw the line when you went around in a circle and you had to end it, and that created a shape. Same thing. But a series of shapes can also have what we also refer to as implied lines. As you can see that this is no more than just several, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 shapes put together, but it makes one creature. All right, but there's nothing connecting that. Your eyes kind of fill in the edges of those white stripes there that create the rest of the creature. So basically, you're dealing with these a series of shapes that are making up one object. Or we look at this, it's like what we have here is you can look at all these elements, but if you look at the sandals on the right side, you can see that the sandals are making up another object, which is the shape of the Coke bottle there. So it's kind of interesting how you can have shapes creating different shapes. There's also pattern and texture. Visual pattern is repeat of an element whose total effect is more than the individual parts. All right, the visual pattern is repeat of an element whose total effect is more than the individual parts. And what we're dealing with here is a series of different patterns, or what we call textures as well. All right, so you look at this, it's like, oh, there's a series of different objects kind of like put together to create, oh, sorry about that, create one texture. All right, that texture there is kind of like a background element. If you had just black, it would actually look much different. So in this particular element, the illustrator here wanted to include some kind of texture within the background. Or here we get this checkerboard pattern. And when we get to somebody who has that pattern there that is really, really close to it, our eyes play illusions on us. So it's like we can't, it's hard for us to determine where the edge of that woman is against that checkerboard pattern. So there's a defeat, or there's a difference between the patterns. There's also space. Space is the area between elements on a page called either white space or negative space. And in here, what we're dealing with is what we call white space. White space is just not the color white. I mean, it can be, but it's more or less, we deal with what is called negative space. Negative space is there is nothing there. But what that space does is it brings attention to something else. So if we look at these, you can see that in the Star Trek Into Darkness there. Oh God, sorry. You have that white space around Khan in that poster, but that space there also makes up the Federation symbol in that poster. Or you look at the Batman icon. Even though right now you can see that the black there was referred to as a negative space. That negative space is pulling you towards that bat symbol. That is what is called negative space. Not necessarily white, but a space there that is drawing attention to something else. All right, we talk about what is called figure ground relationships, and what that refers to is what is going to be the figure and what is going to be the ground. In this instance here, we got the slipper there. The slipper, we look at the slipper becomes the figure, the element that is of most importance. The blue around it becomes the background, or what we call the ground. All right, so if you're looking at the slipper is the figure, the blue is the ground. If we're looking at Cinderella there, Cinderella becomes the figure, the slipper becomes the ground, or that white color behind it becomes the ground of it. We're dealing with depth. Depth has a visual perspective, is an effective way of creating the illusion of depth, giving the viewer the perception of physical space. So when we deal with depth here, you remember back when we dealt with line had the lines that created that three-dimensional object of the hand, that three-dimensional space there. It created depth in the object. So if we look at this, we got what looks like, even though it's a series of just black on white paper, it refers to what it looks like is you're looking down a cliff. You're a bird looking down at a cliff of reflection or refraction. It gives that moment of depth there. Or here we have a series of arrows that are kind of like going over hills. Even though, again, they are just black lines drawn on a yellow sheet of paper there, it still gives you that idea that you're looking through a window into a yellow world that shows the lines kind of going over the hills. All right. So I hope that's it for now. The next little presentation is going to be all about color. So have a good day.